Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the Finding You podcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, 2026. So I'm glad to be with you this evening. This is a topic that came to mind to talk about tonight because somebody had shared with me that they had recently heard a critique of the concept, the idea, the skill of doing one's inner child work, that somehow that would make us more fractured, or in essence, it would make us even weaker, more vulnerable, and it would be catering to a part of us that needs kind of a more parenting, more strict parenting, more resilience. And I want to debunk that myth, but I want to talk about more broadly the idea of inner child work and really how simple it is and how clearly and simply it can give us access to aspects of our unconscious that we don't even know are driving our everyday behavior. So before I get into that, let's talk about the upcoming events. If you're looking for a deep dive in your own work, May 13th, that's 1 week away. I think we have a spot left. It might fill up as soon as today. So if you're interested, reach out now. If you don't get into the May 13th, which is 1 week and 1 day from now, Finding You workshop, you can attend the June 10th through 14th. That is one that I will be talking and teaching at. So if you're interested in working with me, if you're waiting for this, I do 1 or 2 of these a year. June 10th through 14th will be the facilitation, and I don't know if I do it again, it'll be maybe back at the end of the year or even into next year. So June 10th through 14th is that next offering. For any other inquiries, for private intensives, for couples or for families, you can reach out to us through our website portal, or you can email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. If you're looking for a coach, if you're looking for a therapist, somebody that can help you in the kind of work that I talk about and teach about here, then you can reach out to us through those 2 ways also and get connected. If you would like to attend our May 20th support group as an alumni, reach out to us also, and we'll be happy to give you the link and have you register for that. I'm going to be in New York, just outside of the city, a couple of hours in Rhinebeck, New York, in the Hudson Valley this summer with my daughter Emma. We will be teaching again the workshop that we taught in the fall there, that we had a wonderful time, had great success with. So that's July 12th through 17th. The workshop is titled The Audacity to Be You, Learn to Love Your Horrible, Rotten Self. So if you're not ready for an intensive, for that deeper dive, and you want to kind of get a feel, dip your toe into it, the workshop lands somewhere between lecturing, podcast listening, and intensive therapy work. So it's a group activity with exercises, and you'll get a taste of what it looks like, what it means to learn to love yourself. So if you're interested, go to the Omega website at eomega.org, or we're teaching the same workshop in the fall, September 27th through October 2nd at the Art of Living Retreat Center in North Carolina. So if that date lines up or that geography lines up better for you, you can go to artoflivingretreatcenter.org to find out more and to register. With that, let's get into tonight's broadcast content. So the inner child work. One of my favorite quotes, which is attributed to Freud, says, "Unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways." The basic concept that you have to be open to, subscribe to, or at least consider if doing the kind of work that I talk about, that I teach about, suggests, then you'll have to consider that there's some unconscious material in play. We go beyond the conscious mind, and we recognize that there are unconscious forces. So while you might come complaining about an issue with your spouse, while you might come really struggling with the relationship you have with your child, this kind of therapy helps you to understand what in your background, what in your history, what programming, what hardwiring, what patterns did you become entrenched and programmed by that are playing themselves out in this dilemma. Often one of the greatest difficulties that happens in this process is that you come to realize that you are complicit in your own suffering. And that does not mean that there's not compassion. In fact, it could be argued that we are complicit in all of our suffering, that in some way we're contributing to the very thing that we come to therapy with a complaint about. And that's the best news that I could give anybody. The best news that you could receive is that you are a part of, if not the problem, in your life. And the reason that that news is so good is because then you can be the solution. If you were told, for example, that the other people or what's happening in the world, all those things outside of your control are what are determining your happiness, your peace, your serenity, that would be the worst news that you could receive. Because what that would suggest is that for you to find peace, you have to be in control of everything and everybody outside of you that's hurting you. So this idea from Freud, this idea that he entered into the equation 100 years ago, was that in some ways, because of the way that we learn to adapt, the parts of ourselves that we jettisoned, that we exiled, that we denied, repressed, that those parts are speaking through our symptoms. While they were adaptive at one point and helped us to survive, they are now causing our struggles and our ongoing suffering. They have outlasted their usefulness in our bodies. But it's really critical. One of the reasons why talking about this as an inner child can be so helpful is because it provokes or evokes compassion. So many of our symptoms are deemed by us and others to be ugly, detestable, unacceptable, unseemly, gross, horrible, repulsive. So we, of course, want to get rid of our symptoms. Right? If we are hurting people, if we're upsetting people, people that we care about, if we're sabotaging our own life in some kind of ways, we want to get rid of those symptoms. That only follows. That's natural. But this work suggests, and this quote that I shared with you from Freud suggests, that if you throw the symptom out, you are committing that classic idiom's idea, that principle that you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So in an effort to preserve the baby in this analogy, but get rid of the bathwater, the context, we have to have compassion. We have to have the patience to listen to what our symptoms, what our authentic self, buried, lost, our authentic self is asking for. And one thing I want to say at the outset of tonight, when we talk about inner child work, we're not talking about letting our lives be run by a child. You see, that's one of the reasons why this work gets criticized, because people don't understand. Think about what the myths teach us, what stories teach us. Oftentimes in the early part of a myth or a story, the protagonist, the hero, will have the seed of some great gift, some superpower. But because of their immaturity, their lack of consciousness, their newness to this game, this seed, this kernel of a superpower gets misused, causes all kinds of problems and destruction, gets them into trouble. So then they go on this journey to find the elixir, the healing balm that will cure them. And oftentimes, I've mentioned many times, the hero doesn't get what they were setting out for. But what they do get is an experience that changes them. They develop some new aspect of maturity, of character, some new part of themselves. And with that greater maturity, that greater wisdom, that greater differentiation, they now have the capacity to utilize this superpower in ways that are helpful and not hurtful and destructive and chaotic. So the idea of the inner child is to learn to sit with yourself, to feel. But it's important. I have participated in many intensives outside of the Finding You program in my life, many times. And I have seen where somebody lacked the psychological awareness, the frame, so that the work just becomes catharsis for catharsis' sake. As if the goal is to get a client to cry or to be upset or to yell in anger. Those things can be tools, can be touch points, waypoints along the way. But they have to be understood and integrated into the adult life. The maturity, the wholeness that we have as we arrive and are able to reintegrate ourselves. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote in his book, You Are Here, If you feel irritation or depression or despair, recognize their presence and practice with this mantra. Dear one, I am here for you. You should talk to your depression or your anger just as you would to a child. You embrace it tenderly with the energy of mindfulness and say, Dear one, I know you are there and I am going to take care of you, just as you would with your crying baby. There is no discrimination or dualism here because compassion and love are you, but anger is too. All three are organic in nature, so you don't need to be afraid. You can transform them. So we borrow from the Buddhist tradition as presented by Thich Nhat Hanh of this mindfulness. We listen to our anger, to our rage, to our terror, to our fear. We listen to the symptom, which is the messenger from the unconscious, from the authentic self. We learn to interpret and decipher what it's telling us. That something is not quite right. Something is not feeding us. Some need is gone left unexpressed and unnoticed and unfulfilled. And the symptom becomes this kind of symbolic, ritualized way of meeting that need. And it never quite does the trick because it doesn't address the core root with its honesty, with its rawness, with its authenticity. It seeks to fill some approximation of the whole. But here's another part, a reason why I shared the Thich Nhat Hanh quote. Because in Western philosophies and spiritualities, there is this dualism. There's good and bad. There's God and the devil, and so forth and so on. In the West, the gods that we worship, or God that we worship, I may say, is all good, is no bad. And we've actually alienated, we've separated out the human part, the fleshly part, if you will, and we call that the devil, and in whatever religion you belong to. That's the West. Where if you look at the East religions, their gods are kind of human. They have jealousy and rage and fights and arguments and petty battles with people and in history and so forth. So they don't separate out the good and the bad. They realize that wholeness is the goal. Completion is the goal. That there's some part of the anger, the rage, the violence, the acting out that has wisdom and power and energy in it that's useful to us. And so they learn to transform those behaviors. And when they accept and transform and integrate those behaviors, they have access to the gifts, to the power of that part that has been reintegrated. Oftentimes, what it looks like is they take that story of theirs with its many failings and setbacks, and they become a healer. They become somebody who can help somebody that's going through a similar process. So in this work, we talk about the inner child as integration, understanding ourselves, understanding our history, our background, understanding that we have certain proclivities, certain tendencies, certain patterns that were set long ago when we were very young in a world where we were completely powerless at the feet of the big people in our life. And now that we become adults, we have to grapple with that wounding. We have to grapple with that lost child, that lost part of ourselves. Because if we don't, it will come back ravenous and literally wreak havoc in our lives and the lives of those that we love. Another principle of the detractors, like I mentioned, is that inner child work is just the end. Again, it's a tool, understood best in the context of human development. Like all tools, the value of it depends on the context or the consciousness. As I mention often, learning new tools is not enough. They can be helpful, but if it's just a tool, any tool that you learn today will be put to use in service of your current level of consciousness. And this work that I talk about is about transcendence. A new version of you, a more authentic, more real, more attuned, more whole person. We use the concept of an inner child as a way to understand the feelings, dilemmas, challenges, limitations, energies, and gifts we have inside of each of us. The energy inside of us that we referred to as the inner child is the energy that is likely to be expressed throughout our lives in many situations. It's going to come up. As Jung explains, until you make the unconscious conscious, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. For if the client does not consider the impact of the unconscious on their life, then therapy will be a very limited endeavor. That is why I teach therapists, new therapists, that resistance is something that we honor. We hold resistance with our clients like gold. We don't try to batter our way through it or try to rip off the defense or the resistance. We understand what the resistance is protecting. We understand that to rip away something that up to this point in their life, or most of their life, has been life-saving, is an absolute threat to the individual. So we don't want to get rid of their rage or their anger. We want to hear it. We want to listen to it. But that requires us to have gone some distance on that journey ourselves, to have found somebody that could listen to us and sit with us in our unsolvable problems so that we could sit with ourselves and then consequently sit with the client. As we use the inner child, we say that the primary objective in our intensives is not catharsis. And while catharsis invariably occurs, the processes in our intensives are aimed at providing the client with an experience of inner knowing. The experience that happens at our intensive is that the realization is very personal and embodied. I knew the general landscape of my childhood growing up. There was not anything really factually new that came out of my first intensive as a participant. But I had the bodily sensation of experiencing them again within the role plays and the activities that we participated in. I could feel them. I could feel their power, their gravity. So instead of exiling or alienating the parts of ourselves that did serve us in childhood, we learn to integrate. We learn to take them back. We learn to listen. And with that, we have access to incredible amounts of power, psychic energy. In fact, it could say that if you alienate too much stuff, too much material, you will become depressed. So the mild depression that everybody suffers from who is largely unconscious is lifted. They can become more empowered. Basically, inner child work is the process of getting in contact with your authentic self, understanding your core feelings, struggles, and dilemmas, since those are underneath many of our interactions and are at play with what we struggle in our relationships. I've said this before. The intensives, the group intensives, the Finding You intensives, not the custom or couples ones, but the Finding You intensives essentially contain two pieces of work. The first one is family of origin work. Each individual participant does a large piece of work around their family of origin, not fixing it, not correcting it, just going back and showing us, telling us the story in an action-based piece of work that is led by the therapist. Then the second piece of work is addressing a specific question or challenge, most likely the question or challenge that brought you through the intensive in the first place. And then you can draw upon the wisdom, the experience of your first piece of work, and see how you are unconsciously participating in the dilemma that's presenting itself to you today. It doesn't cure it, it doesn't fix it, but now you know your project. I had to learn in my first intensive that my go-to behavior with people is people pleasing. I called it lying because to me, I needed that dramatic word to keep my attention. I came out of it knowing I'm a liar. I'm a people pleaser. And I don't even know that I'm lying. I just know that I'm wired to tell you what you want to hear. I am the gifted child that Alice Miller speaks of. The gift being I can sense what somebody needs or wants from me, and I'm prone to give it to them, even at the cost of what I need. That's the dilemma. So now my project coming out of the intensive was clear. I have to learn to tell the truth. I spent so much of my time pre-intensive talking about how the people in my life weren't safe. My wife wasn't safe. My business partners weren't safe. My friends weren't safe. And that became my kind of excuse to distance myself from what was my project. Now, all of those things still can be true. My wife, my friends, my colleagues, whomever, they can be varying levels of safety or lack of safety, but that's not my project. I can't fix that. I have to learn to tell the truth, which is to say what I need, what I'm feeling, what I want. And of course, in all relationships, there's some compromise and negotiation. But if it doesn't start from a clarity and an awareness of what I need, then we'll never come anywhere close to an acceptable resolution between the both of us. We internalize the words, feelings, and thoughts of those around us as children. We think that the way that our parents teach us, talk to us, respond to us, react to us, we think the way they engage us is about us. We don't know other. We have no experience of the other. One of my very favorite quotes talks about this idea. I want to skip ahead a little bit. I wrote this in The Audacity to Be You. From Shahadi Arabi, we read this quote that says, "A child that's being abused by its parents doesn't stop loving its parents. It stops loving itself." Now, abuse is a strong word, but mellow that word out. Water that word down a little bit. A child that's being ignored by parents. A child that's being subtly gaslit by parents. A child whose parents have temper tantrums and lashing out behaviors, which everybody does if you've had children. You haven't been perfectly regulated their entire life, or you're some kind of creature that I have not yet met. But the child doesn't make meaning and say, oh, that's just mom, that's just dad, that's just grandpa, grandma. The child thinks something is wrong with them. So we need new information. And it can't just be intellectual or cognitive or academic. My experience is that we have to re-experience ourselves in a different context. The intensity of the Finding You program isn't about how scary or overwhelming it is, although you'll have those feelings on the front end. It's about how safe it is and about how the context and the way that we run it is so different from the outside world that it can't help but change you and your experience of yourself. We must re-experience ourselves in a different context and let go of the old ideas we carry around inside of us. Those that we internalize from our previous contexts, from the people that surrounded us in our childhood. Another quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. Anger is like a howling baby, suffering and crying. The baby needs his mother to embrace him. You are the mother for your baby. You are the mother for your baby, your anger. The moment you begin to practice breathing mindfully in and out, you have the energy of a mother to cradle and embrace the baby. Just embracing your anger, just breathing in and breathing out, that is good enough. The baby will feel some relief right away. So you see how the method here is different than what consciously most of us think? I think most therapists early in their career think that the goal is to help people to be happy. That's what I thought it was. Until I realized that there were some problems, like the loss of a loved one, that I couldn't fix. And to be happy after the loss of a loved one might be a sign of psychosis. So instead, I came to realize, as I said in the Journey of the Heroic Parent, I think my job is to help people feel any feeling that they're having. To hold space for them, to give them a safe context, to express it, talk about it, explore it. I wrote this a couple of weeks ago. You either learn to make meaning of your suffering, or your symptoms will tell the story for you. So we learn to ask ourselves this idea, this thought experiment of imagining a young child inside of us by asking questions. How do they feel? How does he, she, or they feel? How do they feel about themselves? What do they need? How do people respond to their needs, feelings, and behaviors? What seems to be some of their greatest traumas? How do they express their needs? Who are the significant people in their life? And what are the impact of those relationships, the legacy? What messages and beliefs about themselves have they internalized? How do you feel and respond to them? Shame, fear, insecurity, what resources were available to them? I remember when I had my first inner child exercise as an adult, at least the one I remember first. And I remember when I was guided toward a visual journey, a visual meditation, guided meditation. I remember encountering my inner child, my young self, as the leader suggested in this exercise. And I remember being repulsed, thinking he was ugly, that I didn't want to hold him, that I didn't want to talk to him. And that discovery was not a failed experiment. That was as important as anything I'd ever learned. I realized that the part of me that was young, the part of me that needed, see, there was no one around really on a daily basis to fulfill my needs. My father wasn't there. My mother was anxiously and working through raising 3 boys at minimum wage jobs. So I was kind of left to my own resources. So any needs that I had to be repressed because my life was a virtual desert. There was no water anywhere, so to speak. So I learned to not need. But that doesn't work for human beings, to not need. We need things. We need people. We need connection. So then I acted out in ways that hurt people, all kinds of ways. Until I finally looked at the mess of my life and decided to try a different approach, to listen to those parts of myself I had been told to hate, to despise. I've learned as a father that sometimes children mirror back my unhealed inner child work. They show me. The thing about the child being a mirror is often their mirror is time delayed. They don't reflect back how I am today. They reflect how I was years ago or when they were a younger child. I wrote this a few weeks back also. I said, I thought my job was to teach my children, how to consider other people's feelings. That's what I thought my job was. See, that was my job as a child. I had to attend to everybody else's needs just so I had any chance of getting any of mine met. But the fact of the matter is that I forgot. Didn't even know how, didn't even know it was a task to teach my children to consider and honor their own feelings. So this legacy of neglect, unfortunately, got passed through me onto my children. I didn't leave, at least not in the way that my father did, although I spent a lot of time away and working with my children. But I still found myself to be much improved over my father, so I thought they'd be fine. But this inner desert that I experienced, where nobody would attend your needs, I reflected to them. So we were in the grocery store not too long ago, and my daughter was anxiously telling me to get out of everybody's way with my cart. She thought it was a Trader Joe's, and if you know Trader Joe's, it can get kind of crazy and chaotic in there. It's more like a crash-up derby than it is anything else. And my daughter was crawling out of her skin watching me, watching the way how lazy I was with my cart. And when I was younger, I would have been mad at her and thought she was being so intense and controlling. But I looked at her with great compassion and thought, that's what I taught you. I taught you that your primary, maybe even only job was to be cognizant of other people's feelings. So I didn't take what she did personal, but I took it as a gift of sorts, reflecting back to me my own history. I took this from the holistic psychologist a couple of years ago. She says that a wounded inner child looks like somebody who acts out when they are hurt or overwhelmed, the same way they did as children: door slamming, screaming, stomping off, shutting down, denying your reality and the reality of other people's experience, because the child can't be bad. So if you get mad at them, they can't tolerate that. So they will gaslight. You will gaslight. Very defensive, black and white thinking. fantasies that a romantic partner or that somebody else will come to rescue you. It wasn't until my 40s that I realized that nobody was coming. The person who was going to rescue me was going to be me, my new self, my larger self, my more evolved self. A wounded inner child views parents as all-knowing and continues to desperately seek what the parent was not able to give in others. They betray themselves regularly to receive love. When I've written about infidelity, I have made the comment that I still stand by that says, I have never met with a client who has cheated on their spouse, betrayed their spouse, who did not betray themselves first. I've never met somebody like that. Because the acting out behavior, the cheating, the infidelity is a symptom of the unmet need. But because it was unconscious, it comes out in this distorted way. A wounded inner child shames other people for their beliefs and behaviors. Had I not been as conscious that evening at Trader Joe's that I described to you earlier, I would have shamed. My first instinct was to shame my daughter. That was my first instinct. To use my size, my tone of voice, my attitude, I would have even called it a boundary to intimidate and shame her. Instead of looking at it as a gift that she was giving me. Of course, the wounded inner child constantly compares themselves to others because most wounded inner children have a sense of limited resources, of scarcity. So if there's a winner, then there's a loser. So they're always comparing. Their worth is objectively valuable, not subjectively valuable. You either learn to make the meaning of your suffering or your symptoms will tell the story for you. So we learn that parenting our children and ourselves looks a lot more like containing than it does correction. We learn that our children, both in the persons of our children and in the person of ourselves, we learn that our children need containing, not correction. Sit with yourself. Sit and listen to the scared child that lives in you. Don't try to fix or get rid of the fear. Sit quietly and listen to the old scripts and the urges that arise. I am here. I know you're scared and I am here. We can learn to sit with ourselves. But first, we have to find somebody who can sit with us for a long time. That's how it works. Then, after having had the experience of somebody sitting with us, we learn to sit with ourselves. We don't need the defenses anymore because there's no threat. We can say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I messed up. Thank you for telling me. And finally, we're able to sit with others who are suffering in the ways that we have suffered. Really, the idea of the inner child is not about looking for scapegoats or story and to point out and find the villains. That's what many people think. But it's about ownership. We go back to our histories, to the story of our inner child. We go back to discover how our contexts, the people around us, wounded us, how it shaped us. But then we accept that the wounds are now ours. And if we don't acknowledge these wounds, and how they affected us and those that we love, we are at the mercy of a field of energy that remains unconscious. John Bradshaw, perhaps the one that made the phrase inner child famous, he wrote, "The wounded inner child contaminates intimacy in relationships because it demands that one's partner be the provider of all things that the child never receives from its parents." I find it fascinating that we humans get mad at people at their demonstration of their lack of capacity. I understand the hurt, but it's so strange to me that we get mad at people that are flaky, irresponsible. people that don't tell us the truth. We get mad at these people. And we do that because we want to protect ourselves from being hurt. But as you do this work, you'll be less and less angry at the people out there because you'll see yourself in all of them. And you'll have more patience and compassion for yourself. Doesn't mean that you have to expose yourself to abusive people or people that exhibit a pattern of poor behavior toward you, but it does help you to understand what's happened to you, what you carry around within your body, who you have become up to this point is the chief obstacle in everything that you want. And you've got to come to terms with that. Or you will live at its mercy. So for us, we do guided imagery. We imagine what it would be like to travel in time and to find your inner self sitting on a playground near the house where you grew up, to sit in your room or in your living room. We have a dialogue with the child. We fundamentally ask our younger self questions and we listen. Most people want to tell the child not to be scared, not to be hurt, not to be worried, not to feel guilty, not to feel insecure. But you see, those phrases sound a lot like the parents did. So instead we say, we understand. We hear you. I get it, you're scared. I will sit with you. I'm so sorry. Phrases like you have nothing to be afraid of, while that might sound loving, it can also be gaslighting. So we learn to say, I understand why you're afraid. I felt similar in similar situations. The thing that I do when I do inner child work now is I don't do a lot of talking. I ask questions, but I try to listen. And I don't offer advice or solutions. I offer my own presence to myself. My daughter was telling me as she was expressing intimidation for this transition from high school to college life, and she said to me more than once in the past few weeks that life is coming at her quickly, to which I empathized easily with her. But I said to her just yesterday, I said, would you like me to share with you how I've learned to get through these kinds of thresholds, these kinds of periods in life? And she said, yes, I would like to hear. And I said, we do it together. I remember I've told the story when I first was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The first thing I did was call a friend, an acquaintance, who had 2 people in his family that had MS. I didn't know why. I just thought he would know what to say. And he came through. All he said to me when I called and said, Tyler, I just got diagnosed with MS. He said, you'll never be alone in this. You're not alone. And that's really all we can offer in the end is our presence. We want to know, what does the inner child need from us? My inner child needs me to go to therapy. My inner child needs me to have 1 hour a week where I get to be heard about my dilemmas, about my fears, about my insecurities. I get to complain. I get to be me. And I don't walk out of that session less mature and more regressed. I walk out of there with a sense of integration and peace and wholeness. We learn to reparent ourselves. We learn to find people that can listen to our feelings. I've said this a few times in the last few days. I don't spend time with people who have lots of opinions. I don't spend time with people who have lots of advice. It just doesn't make sense to me. The longer I am on this journey, the fewer opinions I have. I'm able to be curious because I've had too much experience of really strong, fervent, dogmatic opinions in my life, and later found out things that caused me to debunk them, to remove them. So I hold on to my opinions very lightly. I hold on to my judgments, hopefully, very lightly indeed. I don't subject my inner child to people who act like the big people where I grew up, who hadn't done their work. I avoid advice, both giving it and receiving it. I listen to people's stories. I listen to people share with me what has worked for them. But they lose me when they start talking about what I should and shouldn't do and what I need to do. In other words, I find myself gravitating toward people who can be present. Sometimes I ask participants to give an ideal response to their inner child. I say, what would you want a parent? Why don't you show me what you would want? I just want to see if they have a sense. They even have the idea of what a parent would look like, who would be able to facilitate a secure development, a secure attachment. And oftentimes they don't know. They say things like, don't be afraid, don't be scared, it'll be okay. And then I show them this sheet that says, this is what it looks like. This is what a healthy attachment response sounds like. These words aren't it, but this is kind of what it sounds like. It sounds like this energy. Thanks for telling me. Tell me more. I appreciate knowing this. I'm so glad you told me. Thank you. That sounds hard. I'm sorry. I am here. You're not alone. That makes sense. Is there anything I can do? You must have a good reason for what you did. I want to understand. What can I do to help support you? I can relate. Instead, what we often heard was, you're being silly, irrational, unreasonable, ridiculous. You're overreacting, making a mountain out of a molehill. You're too sensitive. You're scaring me. You're selfish. You should, whatever you want to put after that. Don't pay them any mind. They're just jealous. Ignore them. You'll get over it. Look on the bright side. Or the question that on paper might look okay, but sounds like, why did you do that? Which doesn't really mean, why did you do that? It means, why did you do that, you idiot? Have you tried this or that? Going to solutions. This is just your depression, your insecurity, your anxiety, your narcissism, your defense, your rationalizing, your justification. We don't say that. We don't rip off the defense. Often people resist inner child work because in the original system, the child had one responsibility: to make sure that the parents felt good about themselves. So this exercise of going back to discover our wounds is a betrayal of that original complicit contract to take care of the parents' egos. But this needn't stop us. We can go back. We can go back not to look for excuses, but to look for understanding. And if we do go back, if we do not go back and look at our history, we'll forever experience our life as one that is dictated by fate. Sometimes the only thing that will empower and embolden us to help somebody to cross the difficult points in their life, sometimes the only time that we'll really wake up to what is happening is when we see others treating our children the way we were treated. Somebody sent me this post today from Instagram that said, your inner child needs you more than your mother's inner child does. I love that. Your inner child needs you more than your mother's inner child does. Sometimes the only reason that a parent who's been told that self-work is selfish and a waste of time will even go back is because they see the legacy of what they were raised with, how they were raised. They see it impacting their child. I took a couple of clips. Somebody sent my co-author of my new book a wonderful piece of art. It was actually his niece, I believe. And she included inside the book this beautiful quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. She wrote, go back and take care of yourself. Your body needs you. Your feelings need you. Your perceptions need you. The wounded child in you needs you. Your suffering needs you to acknowledge it. It's not self-indulgent. It's not navel-gazing. It's going back to learn about ourselves. Marion Woodman said, the little girl in me is still trying to be a perfect little girl. Still trying to please the people she loves. The task of the second half of life is to find out who that little girl really is. So we take home these ideas. Doing this work takes a lot of time, a lot of practice, a lot of sitting with somebody, long enough that we can sit with ourselves. Your inner voice is often acting out on your inner child. You are telling both your literal struggling child and your inner child the same things that your parents and the big people told you. So it's important that you go back and reconsider and look critically. I think critical thinking is one of the things that prevents us from being subject to a cult or to an abusive person in our life. We have to look critically. Your ability to develop compassion with yourself will lead to more compassion with others. As Carl Jung said, the best method for understanding somebody else's darkness, that is their unconscious, is to understand your own. See, the relationship we have with ourselves is the predictor in many ways of the relationship we have with everybody else, of all of our relationships. And the medicine, as I understand it, is to find somebody who can see you. Not fix you, but see you. And then you can fix yourself. It's hard to do this work alone. We need a witness. We need a witness. Jessica Benjamin taught in her book, The Bounds of Love, that the witness that we seek is the one who makes everything real. The root of the self, she explained, is almost always found through another person. When somebody else sees us, we have the experience of, there I am. Even though all of us feel, some more than others, this obligation to protect parents, we have to walk past those sentinels, that task, that ego of our parents. I do not want my children to think that I am perfect, because that would mean that all of the pain they've experienced from me is something in them that's broken. I want them to know how flawed I am. Not, they don't have to know all the fine details, but they need a gross outline, a hazy outline of the fact that Dad's a nincompoop a lot of the time. Good intentions, I don't really think about intentions when I'm listening to it, because I don't think about intentions being good or bad. I know that the reason that people are acting out is because they feel scared. I know that the things that we do to protect ourselves hurt others. I know that. So fear is not a bad motive, or nor is it a good motive. It's just a motive. And we ultimately have to go back and destroy the idealized versions of our childhood. That old adage that I use, that when a client tells me they had a good childhood, I tell them that therapy can fix that. We're worried that this work, this inner child work, might devolve us into a victim, a blame stance toward other people. But it doesn't, because at the end, the dents are yours. The wounds are yours. The inner child is yours. It wasn't your fault what happened to you. But the results of what happened to you are now your responsibility. And if you don't take those on, everybody that you love will pay for them. We learn to honor the mechanisms, the defense mechanisms, the defenses, the symptoms. We learn to honor those messengers. We learn to listen to them, to not judge them. And if we learn to listen to them close enough, they will give us all the wisdom we need. All right, folks. I hope that was helpful. Hope that gave some of you a perspective about what inner child work means. If you're not aware yet, you are allowed to enroll in our Finding You Inner Circle. Alumni are automatically enrolled. But if you're not an alumni and you want to participate in live broadcasts, if you want to participate in the Ask Me Anything episodes and have access to a couple of hours of content each month that nobody else has, email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. My 3 books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, The Audacity to Be You, and Stay in the Room, are available wherever books are sold or on Amazon or Audible. If you'd like to join me for a workshop on The Audacity to Be You this summer with my daughter Emma, who is my favorite co-facilitator, you can come to the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, July 12th through 17th. go to eomega.org, click on the workshops tab and the Audacity BU and sign up there. Or if it works better for you timing-wise or geography-wise, I'll be teaching with Emma the same class at the Art of Living Retreat Center in North Carolina. Go to artoflivingretreatcenter.org. If you want to do a deep dive in your own work, Finding You intensives are those options. May 13th through 17th is almost full. I think there's one spot left. June 10th through 14th is the one that I'll be running. So if you're waiting to work with me, I'll do it once or twice a year, and June 10th is that next offering. For all of their inquiries, for private intensives for couples or families, if you want to attend our support group, which is on the third Wednesday of each month, the next one being May 20th. If you're looking for a coach or for a therapist who works in this model, reach out to us at info@findingyouprograms.com. All right, folks, my next broadcast will be a week from tonight. I'm going to be talking about masculinity redefined and really what healthy masculinity is. We know what toxic masculinity is, but we don't know what healthy masculinity is. And most of the time when people describe healthy masculinity, they're actually describing femininity, which is a part of a healthy male or female, but it's not the same thing. So I'll get into all that next week on the 12th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. After that, I'll be talking about self-help ideas that I take issue with, kind of my call out of self-help ideas that are popular in the cultures. Then I'm going to talk about logical fallacies and critical thinking on May 26th. So that's kind of a lineup for the upcoming ones for May. So I'll see you next week on May 5th at 6 p.m. if you're interested. I also will have some Ask Me Anything episodes put in there also. Anything you want to suggest or ask about, anything you want to relate to me, you can email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. I hope this is a helpful point of contact. And as always, for and on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thank you for showing up to these. Thank you for listening. Thank you for considering and asking yourself difficult questions, because the change in you makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.